We've got a lot of wisdom to cover, so we better get started. Welcome to our fifth lesson on the book of Proverbs as we do a themed study of the many subjects that are covered there. And we won't get done with all the good subjects that are there in 13 weeks, but we'll do our best to get the best of it if we can. Before we begin our study tonight, Brother Jerry's going to lead us in prayer, so let's bow as he does that.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us a beautiful day, for allowing us to live on your earth, to breathe your air, to eat your food and drink your water. We thank you, Lord, for all the blessings which you have given to us. Thank you for life and each thing that we have each day that make life possible, and all the things that we have that make life enjoyable. We thank you, Lord, especially for the spiritual blessings you've given us, especially those you've given us through the revelation of your word. And we pray this evening as we study Proverbs that we will look for the wisdom that you have revealed to us, and that we will look especially for those things where we are lacking, and that we will compare ourselves to your word, and we will see where our shortcomings are, and we will try our best with your help to make up those shortcomings through the application of what we learn. Pray that you will be with us, help us to grow stronger in your knowledge and in service. This we pray in your Son's name. Amen.
Okay, remember that a proverb is a short, wise statement of general truth. That's why we call them proverbs. There are many proverbs that people recognize outside of Scripture even, but these are the ones that are inspired by God, of particular importance to us especially. We say in general because they are not hard, fast rules. A plus B does not always equal C, but most of the time it does. Most of the time what God tells us, if we will observe this in the Proverbs, do what is recommended, abstain from what is not recommended, we will be blessed by that, because that's the nature. Tonight, as we continue our topical study, we're going to begin the first of two lessons on wisdom and the tongue. I haven't counted verses. It would be very tricky to do so, but I think if you counted the subject that is talked about the most in Proverbs, the tongue would have to be up there close to the top, if not at the top. And it's just going to take two lessons to talk about it. And, okay. Yeah, okay. Then we'll go to the other slide in just a moment. As we think about the tongue and what it means, I call our attention to Proverbs 6:16 through 19. We talked about this a couple of times in recent weeks. It's about 6 things that God hates, yea, 7 are an abomination to him. Notice those 7 things: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift and run into evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. Notice that 3 of those 7 are specifically related to the tongue, to speaking. The other 4, we can imagine where the tongue would come into play as those 4 are carried out. In fact, we can't really imagine without the tongue saying something wrong that those other 4 would even take place. But directly, at least 3 of the 7 are specifically about the tongue and what is said. So it's a very important subject to us. Nowhere do we find more material than in the book of Proverbs. Our first lesson tonight will be how not to use the tongue. Wisdom and how not to use the tongue. What not to say. When not to speak. When to hold your peace. Next week, Lord willing, we will take up wisdom and how to use the tongue. We talk about the Proverbs that deal with how the tongue can bless as well. But the tongue's powerful whichever way you go. It can cut very very cruelly in one direction. If it's misused, it can bless in a wonderful way in the other direction. Let's begin with Proverbs 6, verses 12 through 15. We'll go through the Proverbs. Since there's no particular way to do it otherwise, we'll simply go through numerically or chronologically through the Proverbs, chapter by chapter, as the opportunity is there to consider these verses that have to do with how how not to use the tongue. A worthless person, a wicked man, walks with a perverse mouth. He winks with his eyes, he shuffles with his feet, he points with his fingers. Perversity is in his heart. He devises evil continually. He sows discord. Therefore his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy. I think of this kind of person, if I were going to apply a title to him, if I were going to preach a lesson on this fellow right here, I'd call him the troublemaker. The troublemaker. Can't trust anything he says, and what he says is designed to just mess up other people. You know, it's hard to imagine why somebody would want to do that, isn't it? Those of us who are concerned about God's word, concerned about loving and caring for one another, and about everybody, you know, knowing that and doing that. It's hard to imagine someone who just seems to enjoy being a troublemaker, and yet we probably all met people who are like that. There are folks who do just like this guy here does, the troublemaker. Notice that he has a perverse mouth. Literally, a mouth that is distorted or crooked, which means that which comes out of it cannot be believed. Now, notice how he couches his deceit. He can be talking to somebody as if it were true, but notice the body language. We kind of know how this works, don't we? He winks with his eyes. You know, you say something to somebody like that, you know, that's what I want them to think. But you and I know the truth. It's not really so. That's deceit. Now, it may be considered harmless in some cases, but sometimes it's not harmless at all. When someone is trying to pass off something as the truth, when they and the people they're talking to on the other side know better, shuffles with his feet, points his fingers. And I think about this little thing that we do sometimes, you know, and I've never thought that was very funny. We see that sometimes in TV shows and movies, you know, and we see somebody with their behind their back. What does that mean? That means you can't trust my word. You know, I don't think that's amusing. I don't think that's funny. I don't think if one of our children were to do that, what do we want to say to them? We want to say, you know, God's people don't do that. Their yea is yea and their nay is nay. They don't have their fingers crossed behind their back so they think they can tell something that's not true and it'll be okay because it's not okay. Well, that's the troublemaker here. You know, he says something and he tries to get the right people to believe that he wants to believe it. But on the other hand, when he's with somebody else, he'll say, well, you know, give the wink or whatever symbol it is, whatever sign to say, you know, I didn't really mean that. And what he does is he sows discord. He sows discord. He causes problems between people because some people, maybe he's telling the truth. Some people he's telling a lie. Maybe he's telling a lie to everybody. And he just causes problems with the whole group. And the word perverse there, a perverse mouth, I mentioned it means distorted or crooked. The word perversity is in his heart, literally is fraud or fraudulence is in his heart, even though it's the same English word, and they're very related. That's a picture of the troublemaker and how not to use one's mouth. And notice that the proverb in this case tells us he leads to his own destruction. It's going to catch up with him. Now, remember Proverbs, they're generally true. Sometimes we know people that seem to go a long time and get away with things, don't we? And sometimes that may happen. However, in this case, at some point, if nothing else, when they face God, there will be calamity. They will be broken without remedy. In other words, it can't be fixed. That's what without remedy means. Can't be healed. Like Humpty Dumpty, they couldn't put him together, no matter who tried. He was broken. He would never be back together. The troublemaker with the perverse mouth, it'll catch up with him. And there'll be no way to put the pieces back together because of that perverseness in what he's done. It's beyond repair. All right, let's move on to chapter 11 and verse 9, if you're following along there. And this one could fit a court scene. Now, not necessarily all the time, but it certainly would be appropriate for that. You can see somebody saying, here are the facts, here's the truth. And it might not be. The hypocrite with his mouth destroys his neighbor, But through knowledge, the righteous will be delivered. So picture the setting, the gates of the city, and two people are in a dispute with someone else. One accuses someone of doing something that's serious, and his reputation is on the line. Perhaps his freedom or some kind of penalty is on the line, and he's being accused. And up steps another neighbor who's going to testify, who's going to say what's right. He's going to say, well, now I saw this and it didn't happen that way. Or I saw this and yes, that's exactly what he did. I can be a witness to it. Well, some people are hypocrites. They do not tell what is the truth for what maybe different motives. Maybe one side is going to pay him a little money. Maybe one side is a real good friend. He's going to lie for him. Whatever it is, it's someone who doesn't tell the truth, and he destroys his neighbor. His neighbor suffers that penalty that he ought not because he wasn't guilty. And then the other side, of course, we'll look at that kind of approach more next week. Through knowledge, the righteous will be delivered. That is, when the facts are stated. If you have a person who states the facts, the neighbor says, here's exactly the way it happened, then the righteous, the one who's correct and did not do anything that should be penalized, he'll be delivered in that court scene there by the gates of the city. That could well be where something like that takes place. The word hypocrite also, by the way, can be translated as godless, irreligious, a person who doesn't have any integrity. His testimony in any situation will be based upon what's in it for me. You know, I don't care what God thinks. I don't believe in God or whatever, perhaps. What's in it for me? Is somebody going to pay me to say the right thing? Is somebody going to do me a favor someday if I lie for them? That's the kind of person here that we're seeing in Proverbs 11 and verse 9. This is how not to use our tongue. The difference is very obvious, and we know which God would prefer. Move down a few verses to chapter 11 and verse 13. A talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. We think about the informer, the person that just can't wait to get some little tidbit that everybody wants to hear, or that some people want to hear, and run to them and share it with them. It's not information that anybody else needs to know, probably. I mean, it's a secret. It's something that has been a discussion between two people, two parties, to some kind of dispute, perhaps. And it needs to stay a secret because it's going to cause problems. But he who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. That which is discussed or that which is decided. The word carries with it, secrets carries with it a degree of intimacy. We have intimately discussed something. And maybe my reputation and your reputation both are on the line, and we're going to handle this real well. But nobody else needs to hear about it. Nobody else needs to run out and tell everybody in the world what's going on, because that's just going to make things worse. I spoke with a friend this afternoon. Real life situation. That's all I'm going to say. But what was exasperating the situation was talebearers. People who did not want to let something be solved within the bounds of those people who were involved and those people who were trying to help. And that's all they needed to know about it. You know, we sometimes get excited about learning secret knowledge, learning. Well, this is called a gossip. If it's true, you know, we want to hear things that we don't need to hear. We can't help. We can't do anything positive. We don't need to know just so we can pray for them. You know, if they need to pray for them, they can tell us, you know. Talebearer does great damage when things are trying to be solved, when things are trying to be reconciled. Not something we want to do with our tongue. The wisdom of God tells us not to. Move down to chapter 12, verses 17 through 19. Here's something about how words spoken improperly can hurt. Again, how not to use our tongue. Three pairs of contrast here. Using your tongue right will do this, this, and this. Using your tongue wrong will do this, this, and this. He who speaks truth declares righteousness, but a false witness, deceit. And deceit is going to cause problems. There's one who speaks like the piercings of a sword. The tongue of the wise promotes health. In contrast there. Words can be like somebody sticking me with a sword. It can hurt. It can be painful. Sometimes emotional pain will hurt us even more, perhaps, than physical pain. Some situations. That's the alternative. That's a contrast. I can be healthy. I can help someone be healthy, or I can help someone feel like they've just been run through with a sword. Have you ever seen in a movie or on television, or maybe in talking to somebody, someone do something like this, like here, in the conversation? What are they saying? Somebody stabbed me. If they could reach their back, they'd say, somebody stabbed me in the back, That's what they're saying. Somebody pierced me with their words. And boy, did it hurt. Piercings of a sword. The truthful lip shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. What happens to the lie? Most of the time, eventually. And what happens to the reputation of who told that lie? Lies often don't last long. Again, truth, but lies don't last long because the truth comes out. The truthful lip established forever. As long as you tell the truth. As people say, you don't have to remember what you told somebody if you tell the truth. If you tell different stories, you've got to remember, what did I tell this person? What did I say over here? Who did I tell this? But if you tell the truth, it's real easy to remember the truth. And just say it. And it can be established forever. Facts aren't going to come out later to say, well, you were telling the truth. It won't happen that way. So three contrasts there of the truthful mouth and the non-truthful mouth. Also, the idea of a sword is sometimes like the hurt that happens quickly. When rash words are spoken, because a sword, the sword is drawn and, pain can be very quickly, unexpected. So perhaps the idea of rash words that are spoken without a lot of thought and consideration. Move on down to verse 22 of chapter 12. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal truthfully are his delight. All we need to know is what the word abomination means right there, and it ought to scare us from even thinking it's not true. You know what the Lord is? It was things, idolatry, idols. It was the Jewish person who was in a covenant relationship with someone who was a pagan, who was going to lead. Right? That was an abomination to God. It's things that the Lord. Abomination is disgusting to the Lord. And as people who serve the Lord, surely one of the last ways we'd want to be described is disgusting to them. It's what the wise man says about lying lips. Just like falling down in front of some idol, some pagan statue, and worshiping that instead of God disgust him, so does telling a lie. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. That's not the way. That's the way not to use our mouth. Moving ahead, chapter 13 and verse 3. He who guards his mouth preserves his life, but he who opens wide his lips shall have destruction. That word guard there is an interesting word. Back then, the common man, the way he would guard something, because he couldn't afford a castle, he couldn't afford a huge walled city just for himself, but if he wanted to protect something, in particular his animals or something like that, he would build a surrounding circle of thorns. Had a lot of thorn bushes over there. They just get those thorn bushes together and they'd intertwine them. They'd make a big stack of them, I can imagine it would be worse than working with barbed wire today, putting up a fence like that. They would put those in the great, and thieves wouldn't want to climb through or over those. That was the way to guard or protect something. for someone who couldn't afford a walled city or something like that. So that's the idea of guard there. So build a protection around your mouth. Build a protection that keeps not something from getting in, although there's a sermon for that too, but that keeps the things from coming out that don't need to come out. He who guards his mouth, in other words, doesn't say everything he thinks. Doesn't say what might suit the situation and make him feel, better about it, or might get him some kind of favoritism. Those things don't come out because the mouth is guarded. One who does that preserves his life. It's what not to do with their mouth. So this is a good time to stop and ask for questions because Kendall raised his hand. Kendall says the guard around our mouth should be our brain. We think about things before we respond. And that's absolutely true. And within that brain, hopefully, is a trained conscience. Conscience that knows that the truth is right and falsehoods are wrong and knows what falsehoods could do. These very things that we're talking about tonight. The way that they hurt other people, the way that they hurt the one who tells them eventually when it catches up with them. Nothing but sadness comes out of lying. So certainly, our brain, our trained conscience, our ability to make decisions based on the Word of God ought to be a guard around our mouth. What comes out. All right, we're moving to chapter 14 then. I guess I didn't give anybody else a chance to hold up their hand. Any other comments, questions? All right, we'll move on to chapter 14 then because we're about a third done and half our time's gone. In the mouth of a fool is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise will preserve them. We'll stop right there with the first verse. I put these together not because they're so interconnected, because they're in the same chapter. Try to save slides here. The rod of pride. The folks who comment on this, like, often in the Proverbs, don't always agree on exactly what was meant there. But the most common, as far as I can tell, is to understand that the rod was a way of hurting someone. Just as we think of being beaten with a rod. Paul, when he recounts his troubles in the New Testament, Paul talks about being beaten with rods. So the mouth of a fool is a punishing stick of pride. And apparently thinking about the way others can be hurt by it. Although the person who's doing it can be hurt as well. And that's what some people suggest. The lips of the wise will preserve them. A true witness delivers souls, but a deceitful witness speaks lies. A true witness, one who raises their hand and says, I'll tell the truth. Here's the truth. And they tell the truth. And then the righteous person is preserved, like we talked about earlier, because the truth exonerates them. So that's the kind of witness that we need to be. I guess that's enough. I had something else to say on that one. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. There are some proverbs which to me are gems. They're all great. We ought to study them probably more than we do. But some of them, ever since I first heard them, I thought, boy, people really need to remember that. I need to remember that. We all need to remember that. Well, this is one of those jewels. How much more harmony there could be, and how much less conflict and turmoil there could be if folks would just remember that one right there, verse 1 of chapter 15. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And the reason it's so important and the reason it would work so well is because it's exactly the opposite of what we do, isn't it, naturally? When we're challenged by someone who's angry, our body starts pumping out all kinds of substances inside and gets our heart rate up. And we want We want conflict. We're made for that. In order not to do it, in order to give a soft answer, the mind has to control the body. Say, calm down, body. It's okay. I don't have to raise my voice just because he's raising my voice. I don't have to use an unkind adjective just because she's using an unkind adjective. I don't have to do that. And if we will not, quite possible that it will turn away wrath. It'll turn down the level of the conflict because we answer with a soft answer. I don't mean just a soft voice. It has to have the right content too. But I think both are important. Instead of raising our voice and instead of using words that will inflame, we use words of kindness. We talk like this, like we were talking to them in a conversation. I think that's a jewel. Just a minute, let me finish this last one, John. The heart of the righteous studies how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours forth evil. We had the phrase, people running off at the mouth. They just talk and talk and talk, and they aren't thinking. That's dangerous. The heart of the righteous studies how to answer. The wicked, they use their mouth just, constantly without that thought that Kendall was talking about a while ago to guard our mouths. John? Gentle answer. I think that's a good translation too, it seems like. All right, chapter 17. We've got 3 verses there that we want to talk about. An evildoer gives heed to false lips, but a liar listens eagerly to a spiteful tongue. Almost enough to make you cry to think about how some people respond. Some people just love lies. Like that boy Jerry Clower used to tell about. I can't remember his name because Jerry Clower had all those interesting names, but he said he'd rather climb up in a tree to tell a lie than stand on the ground and tell the truth. Some people just seem to excite them. He listens eagerly to a spiteful tongue. So if we want to, we're going to be able to find people who like to listen to whatever we have to say, aren't we? That's what makes gossip so pervasive, I suppose. It's always possible to find somebody who wants to hear it. Verse 7, excellent speech is not becoming to a fool, much less lying lips to a prince. In other words, there's some things that just don't go together. If you're going to be a ruler, if you're going to be in charge of a group of people, you need, lying lips just don't go with that. You need honesty, you need integrity on the throne, in the position of leadership. It doesn't even go together otherwise. It doesn't make sense. And excellent speech, you don't think of a fool when you think of excellent speech. You think of the kind of things we've been talking about already that people do with their mouths when they're unguarded. So that's a contrast there, 2 things that you don't expect. He who has a deceitful heart finds no good, and he who has a perverse tongue falls into evil. So we have consequences there. A deceitful heart, all you're going to find is more deceit, more people that like to listen to you who are evil themselves. And first tongue falls into evil. It's like a pit. They used pits a lot more back in those days than we do today for catching animals. And the pit was a trap. And if a person walked into it, it trapped them just as well. If there was something there to hurt them, it hurt them just as well. That's what a deceitful person, perverse tongue does. He who has knowledge spares his words, and a man of understanding is of a calm spirit. We speak less if we will use our tongue wisely because we're thinking about what we say first, right? That's why you spare your words. If you don't think about it, just let the mouth get started. You can be in abundance of words, but a lot of those words may not be edifying. But if you think about it and you consider, let's say, what would be the right response because I'm a Christian in this situation, you're just inevitably not going to say as much. Spares words. And a man of understanding calm spirit as he thought it through. Even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace. This is another one of those jewels I've always thought was interesting. When he shuts his lips, he is considered perceptive. What's the phrase, what's the saying that we have today? Better to be thought of as a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Well, that came from Proverbs 17:28, I would say. Because, you know, you can you can go a long ways if you just keep your mouth shut. Especially when you don't really have anything helpful or needful to say. Let me ask a question. Does anybody in here remember a movie starring Peter Sellers called Being There? 1978. Anybody remember? Hey, good. I got somebody that does. Nobody else. Michelle, you're old enough for that? You saw oh, okay. It is full of irony. It's like this right here. The fella, and I'm just going to give you a real quick at Peter Sellers' place. It's there. Bless his heart. He's a normal person. And he's worked for this rich guy in Washington, D.C. That's about all. And all he knew about the work, because he never went anywhere, never got out of the house except in the garden, was gardening and what he saw on television. He was a watcher and a gardener. That's all he was. The movie plays out, fate has him into him. It happens to be an advisor to the president. And they begin talking to him, and he begins to spout off all of these simple sayings, because his mind is simple. And yet they interpret those as tremendous wisdom in just a few words. You know, this guy's a genius. And he's dressed well because he worked for a rich guy. And he winds up, you know, living with this person who is an advisor to the president. And the guy that's advisor to the president eventually has a disease and dies from it. And as they're into the movie, I've skipped a whole lot, obviously, into the movie, they're leaving the cemetery. And as they're walking away, some of the top aides there of that particular political group are talking about who can we, you know, run for the next president, because this guy's passed away now. Who's our next candidate? And they're all looking over at that guy, and they all unanimously say, it's him. He's the one. He's full of all that great wisdom. But it's great wisdom because he spared his words. He said everything calmly, didn't say very much. They put the interpretation on them of wisdom. So it is a really ironic movie that expresses this point right here. And I guess we all could tell stories about seeing a situation in life where somebody simply spared their words, spoke calmly, and people interpreted that as great wisdom. And sometimes it's not so, that movie. But it really happens. That's the movie right there, Being There. Okay, chapter 18. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calls for blows. Okay, mouth gets him in trouble. Mouth gets him in situations where there's liable to be a physical encounter as a result of it. A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. In other words, we're back to some more consequences here. The person whose mouth is not guarded, who is not controlled, they're hurting themselves too. They can hurt a lot of other people, but they're going to hurt themselves. The words of a talebearer are like tasty trifles. They go down into the inmost part. That's not so much about consequences for the person as they are about other people. A tasty trifle is a fancy dessert, or maybe an hors d'oeuvre, whatever. It's some little thing that, boy, I love those things. You know, I go somewhere, I'd rather eat that than anything else. That's the delicacy that I like to consume. Well, the wise man said, you know, the things that a talebearer says, you know what a lot of people find those to be? Delicacies. They just love them. And they swallow them whole. That's our expression too, isn't it? They swallowed that hook, line, and sinker. It went right down inside of them. And then where does it go? It goes somewhere else to cause more damage. And it gets passed on. That's what a talebearer does. The wrong way to use our mouth. Now, we should not be do because of wisdom. Okay, another jewel. And I think every parent needs to have this on the refrigerator. He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but is there a parent who has never, with their child, try to give them an answer before they hear the whole question? If you're totally innocent of that, I salute you. But that's hard to do. Because we want to get on with what's happening. We want our children to proceed. We want to go with what we're doing, and we already know what they're going to say, and we know what needs to be done. We know what the answer is, and so we answer them before they finish telling us. And sometimes it's not right at all. And those of us who've been parents, I'm guessing we've all experienced that and struggled with that, or maybe struggle with it now. It is folly and shame because, well, you haven't heard the facts yet. You can't possibly. You may guess the right answer, just may pull it out of the air. Maybe you're lucky. But you can't possibly know until you hear the whole story. You are prejudging. And that leads us to another problem that we need to avoid by not doing this. Prejudging is a whole lot like prejudice. Prejudice. That's reaching a conclusion before you hear everything. That's looking at a little picture of something as far as the information and saying, well, I know what I need to know about that. That's prejudging or prejudice. We need to deal with that. That's not the way wisdom wants to use our mouths. Do you recall Jesus was in Jerusalem for the Feast of the Tabernacles? He was really, John chapter 7, he's really having it back and forth with the Pharisees. A lot of people were believing. A lot of them said, well, I don't know. They say no prophets ever come out of Galilee, which there's a good story there, too, if we had time for it. But anyway, the Pharisees had all decided, the members of Sanhedrin especially, well, we know who he is. We need to kill him without ever having heard everything. Remember what Nicodemus said to them? Does our law judge a man before it hears him and knows what he is doing? Proverbs 18:13. Let's think about the law that Moses gave our forefathers. Do we judge somebody before we know who they are, what they're doing, what they stand for? Are we prejudiced? Do we prejudge? That's exactly what they were doing. You remember, they didn't pat Nicodemus on the back either, did they? What did they say? You from Galilee too? Oh my, we got so much good minutes. All right, let's keep on going. Who walks in integrity than the one who is perverse in his lips and is a fool. In other words, it's much better to be a poor man with integrity, somebody who's well-to-do and gets away with a whole lot, but their life is marked by falsehoods, by lying. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies will not escape the consequence of the misuse of our tongue. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies shall perish. Very similar, but also stating the same thing, that there would be penalties. Proverbs 20 verse 19, and some of it sounds a lot like back in chapter 11 and verse 13. He who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets. We've heard that before. Therefore, do not associate one who flatters with his lips. Do not associate. Wise people not only want to guard their mouth, but they don't want to be around people who don't guard their mouth. Now, what is your first thought? No hands down, or no comments, really. This is a rhetorical. What is your first thought when you're with somebody and they spend most of the conversation tearing down other people? They know something on, they just can't wait to tell you. What is your first thought when they walk away? Who are they going now to tell about me? Where are they going to spread something that's not true about me? If they talk about all these people, I sure wouldn't trust them with anything that I know. I don't even want to be around them. Well, that's what the wise man is saying. Don't associate with one who flatters with his lips. Tells you how much better you are than all these other people. He gets over with them. They tell them how much better they are than you. Because if you're a talebearer, you're not going to be dependable. Don't associate with them. Getting treasures by a lying tongue is the fleeting fantasy. Did you know that phrase was in the Bible? The fleeting fantasy, it's also hard to say, of those who seek death. Fleeting fantasy. I'm gonna get to the top. I'm gonna make my fortune, and I'm gonna do it by saying whatever I need to say, whenever I need to say it. A fleeting fantasy. That's the end of it. You're seeking death, really. Whoever guards his mouth and tongue keeps his soul from troubles. Again, that word guards there. That big thorn, it's around you, making it around your mouth, so the wrong things don't come out. Do not speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of your words. What did Jesus say about what not to give to the dogs? I think I heard it. Good. Sorry. Don't give that which is holy to the dog. What about the swine? Don't put your pearls in front of them. And that's exactly what he's talking about here. Fool, this doesn't mean that we don't want to study the Bible with somebody who's having some struggles with it and maybe doesn't have a full understanding. But once we identify somebody as the fool based on the Proverbs definition of it, the wisdom's not going to do any good. You're much better off using your time as a steward with someone who's listening, who's willing to listen. Do not be envious of evil men or desire to be with them, for their heart devises violence and their lips talk of troublemaking. Who unfortunately are our young people's heroes, idols? Who are they envious of? Who do they want to be like? Most of those celebrities are from being godly, aren't they? It'd be great if they could envy, or if they could hold up as role models those who were living and demonstrating control of their tongue. Debate your case with your neighbor and do not disclose the secret to another. Don't tell what you ever talked about in private, but something here, some kind of situation. Here's it, expose your shame, you ruin. You see, your neighbor wants to talk just to you. Everybody doesn't need to know about it because that's not helpful, as we talked about earlier with a similar proverb. What does Matthew chapter 18 say? If your brother sinned against you, go and talk to him alone, one on. If you have to, then later take two or three. You know, everybody doesn't need to know, and it's not going to be helpful in solving things to do it that way. We got a couple more, but that's pretty good there. We got through most of it. Next week we will talk about wisdom and how to use your tongue, because just as it's a great destroyer, the tongue can be a great blessing. Appreciate your comments and your attention.